It is time for a new tier list video. We had the Metagross buff patch, so we're gonna dive into this right now. We're gonna have two tier lists as always. First one for top and bot path, and the second tier list for central area. Always splitting them up because it doesn't really make sense to have them in one tier list. You know, because one Pokemon might be high on one tier list, but low on the other, so the average doesn't really tell us all too much. So let's head into the top and bot path tier list. I want to explain very fast how I'm ranking these Pokemon. S is pretty much the best Pokemon in the current patch. A+ is just above, you know, the meta. Very strong, stable Pokemon that are always get a lot of value done. A are meta Pokemon or Pokemon that are very strong and underrated. B+ is Pokemon that are still viable and you can play without feel like you are trolling your team. B is already kind of trolling. It's on the borderline of being pretty much just terrible. And C are Pokemon you should not pick in top or bot path. So let me just start with the buff Pokemon as well. For Gardevoir, I think Gardevoir with the Night Move buffs, it goes back into A tier. You can pretty much walk into every single team fight and have your Night Move up. Wigglytuff as well. Wigglytuff, I think, is pretty good right now. Resonant Guts is also a great item for Wigglytuff, and I think the buffs are pretty good. I think Wigglytuff was always actually quite decent, but it's more of a pre-made Pokemon. Like, it's not a good solo queue Pokemon, but in like trios or 5-stack, it gets a lot of value done. Slowbro, either S or A+, but I think A+ makes the most sense. I think A is going to fill up a lot in this patch, because the patch is currently quite good. There's just one outliner that I'm going to talk about later. You guys can probably guess which Pokemon that is. There's just one big outliner. Besides that, everything else is quite fine. Talonflame is a speedster you can play in path, has good early game, and has good last hitting and early game damage. Clefable, currently one of the best Pokemon in the entire game. It's the most played Pokemon for a good reason. Heals a lot, it's easy to play, and Gravity is so painful to deal with. Lucario, I think Lucario is for poker, or like for people who just play Lucario. If you play Lucario, you're going to be good at it and get a lot of value done. If not, the character is probably going to be quite useless. Snorlax, yeah, Snorlax is quite fine. I think he could even be A, but it's another similar Pokemon to like Wigglytuff as well. Like, it needs a team. And I think there's just a lot of stronger defender Pokemon right now, but Snorlax is also quite fine. Crustle, I think a lot of people would understand how good Crustle is if they would play it, but Crustle is quite strong, I would say as well. Pikachu, Pikachu's weird. Like, it's somewhere in between B+ and A, I would say. It's nothing too amazing. It still gets the job done, but yeah, I mean, Pikachu's alright. I think B+ is probably totally fair for it. I'm not sure if Gardevoir should be A then, but I do think Gardevoir is quite good now again. Machamp has fallen a bit. It just takes a bit too long to really get going, so B+ I think for Machamp is quite fair. Mr. Mime, I'm poking into A. I think Mr. Mime is actually quite underrated and very strong. Another Pokemon like Crustle, if people would play them, they would actually understand how good these Pokemon are. Ninetales, probably into A tier still. Desert Avalanche is still fine. Also good counter to Metagross. Veil is also a good build, so quite decent. Cinderace, even with the buffs to Ember, still absolute garbage. Goes into the last tier. Blissey, I think just a bit worse than Clefable, but still also very strong. Mamoswine is similar to Snorlax, where those Pokemon are good, but they're just outclassed by other defender Pokemon. Sylveon with the buffs goes back into A tier for me at least. Could even be higher. I think Hyper Voice is super strong again. And also Mystic Fire with the Night Move buffs is quite nice. Greedent has fallen off a tiny bit, I would say, but it's not really too bad either. So I'm into B+ tier. Decidueye is a weird lane Pokemon. It only works if you have an XP shared defender or support with you. So if you have that and you see it, you can pick it. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend it. Dragonite and Path, I really cannot recommend whatsoever. It just takes way too long before it even gets going and does anything. Serena, even though its win rate is good, it still doesn't feel like I pretty much never see Serena in my games at all. So I can't really put it higher than B+, I feel like. It just really doesn't do all too much. Trevenant is currently what I think one of the best defender Pokemon in the entire game. Super frustrating to deal with. A lot of stuns. I can only recommend playing it if you're a defender player. Aegislash, similar to Serena. Actually, I think Aegislash actually just doesn't feel good, like, at all. I play it and then I realize, like, it just can't teamfight right now. It feels so miserable to teamfight on Aegislash, really. It really does. Teamfighting is so difficult on it right now. Even though I love playing it, can't recommend. Hooper. I mean, Hooper's still just such a powerful Pokemon. Supports in general are so good right now that I think Hooper... I don't know if it's S tier though, but maybe it's the S tier. Very difficult decision to make. But I think maybe S tier is still totally fair as well. Let's do it A+. Let's do A+. I think Clefable is even more annoying to deal with. But yeah, Hoopa as well, of course, is very, very strong. Blastoise, I would say, maybe currently the best defender. Super, super frustrating to deal with. Surf Hydro Pump, it does a lot, but it doesn't really feel like it's ST either. Like, ST is really for those Pokemon that are like above the rest by a lot, right? Even Clefable putting into ST is quite difficult, I would say. But it's really picked, right? Like, Blastoise is picked a lot for a good reason. I might think about it later on still, if I want to swap it around. Venusaur, I think, is quite good in lane, with that level 7 Solar Beam Power Spike, and the Venusaur level 7 evolution just has been very good. Eldegoss as well, easily A+. Like, all these healing Pokemon are super, super strong. Then we have Absol, which is a fine lane speedster, goes into B+, has good early game, good last hitting, and can snowball games. Duraludon, yeah, I mean, it's alright. Nothing, to write home about, but it's still quite alright. Azumarill, I haven't played much on the current patch, and I really don't know if it's good right now. Like, you just get stunned, I feel like. I feel like right now it's very difficult to play Azumarill. There's so many stuns that disrupt you a lot. So I think Azumarill actually for myself as well dropped down a tiny bit, and I really haven't played it much recently either. So yeah, it can be a bit difficult right now for Azumarill. Espeon, I mean, Espeon to me is still very, very strong Pokemon. Still Power Psybeam is super, super powerful. It does a lot of damage. Delphox goes down into B+ tier. It's alright, but it does need a lot of experience. But you can play it in Path and be totally fine with it. Same for Glaceon. Glaceon may be A as well, but there's certain games where it just doesn't feel good in Path as well still. But it's for sure a Pokemon you can play in Path as well. And the early game can be a bit rough, though, of course. It needs level 6. Until then, it's quite weak. But Glaceon is strong and can be played. Buzzwole, currently one of the best all-rounder Pokemon in the entire game. Even though there's a lot of stunts in the game, Buzzwole as well, of course, has a lot of stunts himself. Is very annoying to deal with. Garchomp, I'm going to drop down to B+ as well. I don't think it's all too good right now. I mean, B+ again means those are Pokemon you can play and be totally fine with, right? Like, B+ doesn't mean it's bad. B+ still means these Pokemon can be played and you can have a lot of success with it. I just want to make this clear. Cramorant, one of those underrated Pokemon, just like Mr. Mime and Crustle as well, goes into the A tier. Charizard, even with level 7 Power Spike, it's quite difficult for it to be higher than maybe B tier. You do get level 7 quite early still, but it does struggle a good amount, so yeah, it's nothing too amazing either. Tyranitar in Path shouldn't be played at all. Please don't, it takes way too long for it to get going. Zeraora, even with the buffs, doesn't really do anything in lane or in Path, not a big fan. Same for Gengar. Gengar and Charizard are like above C, just because they can pick the enemy carry and get comeback experience. That's the only reason why I put them higher than, whatever this is. Honestly, maybe I should just do this, like, call this B, this C, and, BCD. Might actually be better, honestly, for representation. Because, yeah, this is still not good. Like, I think this is probably better. A, B, C, D. And then we have A+ tier as well. I think that's totally fine. Greninja, still terrible Path Pokemon as well. Cannot recommend. Mew, easily A tier. I'm not sure if higher than A, but people also are underestimating how good Mew still is. Scyther, I think Scyther is so bad, like really, really bad. Dojo, even after the nerfs, I think is still quite fun. You can also play Tri-Attack, still easily an A tier Pokemon to me. Scizor, the classic Scizor, it's not as bad as Scyther, but it's still also quite mid. Sableye, people think Sableye is bad, but like it's so frustrating to deal with this Pokemon. I think it still deserves to be B tier. Maybe it's C tier, but I think B tier is fine as well. Zoroark, yeah, I mean, it's decent, but also has fallen off a tiny bit. There's one better speedster for Path that just is a bit more dominant, which is Leafeon. Even though Leafeon has a terrible win rate, we have seen in tournaments, just one after another, that Leafeon is a very strong Pokemon, thanks to level 4 Solar Blade being ridiculously overpowered. Certain Strikes Urshifu do not play in Path. It's absolutely dead of a build, even in Central Area, so in Path it's even worth. This Urshifu build is also quite bad. On level 5 at least you do get some last hitting, but you need level 5, so still pretty bad. Dragapult can't lane. Dreepy is one of the worst lanes in the entire game, and Dragapult needs KOs, and you will not get KOs as a Path Dragapult unless the enemy team is very bad, but then of course everything can work. Comfy as well, A+ tier. All these supports are so good, actually. Goodra joins these defenders down here just because it's just a bit tiny. You know, it's behind Blastoise, behind Trevenant, behind Slowbro, even behind Crusse. Goodra just takes too long sometimes, right? And Goodra's not a, like most defenders can run XP share. Goodra with XP share just doesn't feel good. And XP share is still overpowered. Lapras, even with the nerfs, I think is easily A tier still. I played it a good amount already again, and I do think it's still totally fine to play. Chandelure is currently one of my favorite Pokemon in the entire game. But I think I'm still only going to put into A tier. But Flamethrower is such a good bid with Poltergeist. Very underrated as well. Then we have Umbreon. I think these are currently the 3 best defender Pokemon by a large margin. Or like these 4. But I don't think any one of them necessarily is S tier. But they are super, super good. Then we have Inteleon. Still, Inteleon goes into S for lane Pokemon, just because Water Gun is ridiculous. Snipe Shot is still good as well. They nerf Liquidation. Liquidation is pretty much gone, but Snipe Shot and Water Gun early game is still good enough. Then we have Blaziken, who got a secret nerf this patch as well, but I do think Blaziken is still quite good. Muscarada also has good laning phase. I think goes into A tier for me. Mimikyu and Path I'm not a big fan of. I'm gonna put it into B tier. And then the EX Pokemon I'm going to ignore because they're going to be gone this season, so there's no point in ranking the EX Pokemon. And then we have Metagross. And yeah, Metagross, we have an S tier, but let me add a row above and call it God tier, as Metagross is the new God tier Pokemon of the game. And I think a lot of the meta in the future will resolve around what Pokemon is good against Metagross and which isn't. So I think it's safe to put into God here. This Pokemon is ridiculously overpowered right now. Either Gyro Ball and Magnet Rise. You put out insane damage numbers the entire game. Also my Comfey is up here again. Comfey with Metagross is of course very, very good. So yeah, this is my current tier list. Again, some of these could also be S tier maybe, but I don't think they're necessarily S tier, but I think these for sure are. And next up we have the Central Area tier list. So let's start with the second tier list for Central Area. I'm going to try to be a bit faster about this one because I don't think too many people care about the Central Area tier list in general. As we have Venusaur for A+, I think it's quite good. Gengar's well still, can't really put it all too high, but in jungle it's for sure a bit better than in lane. Goes into B tier. Gengar's a weird Pokemon, just needs to snowball, and if it doesn't, it's quite weak. Gardevoir as well back into A+, with the Unite move buffs, I would say. Very, very good again. Absol, I'm a big fan of Pursuit Sucker Punch, and I do think it's very good in the current meta as well. We have Garchomp going to B tier. It can Central Area quite well, and it's for sure something you can play there as well. Then we have Greninja. Greninja is weird. I think B is also just the highest I can place Greninja. It's quite fine, but nothing too special either. Lucario in Central Area, absolutely terrible, cannot recommend. Talonflame, yeah, I think B is also quite fair for this Pokemon. Same for Zeraora. All these speedsters are just like lacking a bit something right now, but still something you can definitely pick. Cramorant, A+ as well right here, Dive Air Slash, such a good build, especially for Central Area as well. Cinderace with the buff still, nothing special, goes into B for me. Pikachu in Central Area should not be played a single bit. Machamp as well, it can Central Area, it gives a bit more experience, but nothing too special. Ninetales, yeah, I think C tier is also quite fine for Ninetales. Veil and Gleam can actually be a good Central Area build. A lot of people don't believe in it. Is it D tier now? Is it C tier? Probably, yeah. Mystical Fire Sylveon. I mean, Sylveon is a Central Area Pokemon that can, like in tournaments, it will jungle split, but I don't think I'm talking about tournaments when I make these tier lists necessarily, right? So, yeah. But you can Mystical Fire Central Area, you can Hyper Voice Central Area, and it's for sure nothing too bad either. Decidueye, quite good. Goes into A, just a very solid Pokemon. Same for Dragonite. I actually am a big fan of Dragonite. I think Outrage and Hyper Beam are both excellent builds you can be playing. I don't know, is anything even in S tier thinking about it? I'm not even sure if anything goes into S tier right now. Drylodon is still pretty good as well in Central Area. I do like it. Same for Delph. Actually, no, Delphox has dropped for sure. I think Delphox does have a difficult time now just because it needs so much experience. Espeon. I'm not a big fan of Central Area Espeon anymore. I think it had its time, but that time is sadly over. Glaceon still, I think in Central Area is easily A+ tier. There you get more experience, you get level 10 very fast, which means you will dish out an insane amount of damage. Buzzwole in Central Area is alright, just because it's a good Pokemon. The problem is it lacks late game, And if your character doesn't have late game in central area, it can also be quite difficult. I feel like Mew has dropped in central area. Also to beat here. I do think you should probably just only play it in Path now. As we head over to Aegislash. Yeah, I mean, see, I guess. I don't think it's completely griefing, but I do like it as well. I do like Aegislash jungle, right? I made videos about it a lot of times already. But yeah. Tyranitar's an interesting Pokemon, because Tyranitar is actually one of the best counters to Metagross. Metagross currently gets most of the sustain and survivability from shields, and Tyranitar doesn't care about them. Only problem is what's holding Tyranitar back, of course, is that it needs a lot of experience, right? And if the enemies don't have Metagross, well, then you're not countering anything. But in theory, right now, it could be quite good because it counters stuff. Scyther in central area goes into C. Still nothing too special either. Same for Azumarill. I don't like them whatsoever when it comes to central area. Scizor, I know people will be like, I have a 60% win rate, Chris, on Scizor in central area. Nice, congrats. Still doesn't make it a good Pokemon. As we have Dodrio. Dodrio is interesting. I don't know where to put it right now after the nerfs as well. I think Tri-Tech is still quite good, and I still think it's quite the annoying Pokemon to deal with. Still gonna put into A+ tier. Zoroark is good in central area because it gets level 5 very fast. So I do think it's also quite good there still as well. Surging Strikes Urshifu. I don't think it's D tier. Actually, no, it's D tier. It's so bad right now. Like, you can't play it. Don't play Surging Strikes Urshifu. Dark Bear. I think it's good in tournaments, but I think in ranked it's just straight up meh. Okay, Dragapult goes into S tier. In solo queue. In tournaments or something, not really. But when it comes to solo queue, Dragapult, of course, something that gets KOs, which is easy in solo queue, right? And snowballs of it is going to be very good. Charizard I forgot so far. I mean, yeah, Charizard, I think everyone forgets about him. I don't think he's as bad as people make it out to be, but I think B tier, again, B tier are Pokemon that you can pick, you can have success on, if you're good at them as well, if you know what you're doing, then those Pokemon can be played, and B doesn't mean bad, right? I mean, B is bad, but B doesn't mean bad. Alright, Serena in central area gets level 6 fast. It's alright. Chandelure, again, I'm a big Chandelure fan right now, but I still don't want to put it much higher because, you know, a lot of people don't really play it or think of it too highly, but I do think Chandelure is currently one of my best Pokemon, actually, and it's very good. Zacian, again, we're gonna ignore. What else do we have down here? We have Leafeon in central area. Also, I mean, so again, in tournaments, it's a bit difficult. Like, sometimes it's difficult to rank these Pokemon depending on what, you know, we are in. I do prefer it in Path, so I don't think you should be central with it. In tournaments, they do one buff. They do Xatu into one buff into pressuring lanes, right? But there's nothing that happens in our normal rank games. It doesn't, right? So, like, there's no point in making a tier list around, like, tournament play. So, in our normal gameplay, I think Leafeon is A tier as well there. We have Inteleon. I would say A+, even though I prefer you play it in Path. Actually, no, like, Inteleon can't be up here, right? Like, Snipe Shot in central area is just not really it, I would say. So, yeah, I'm gonna put it into B tier, never mind. Blaziken in central area. I don't like it whatsoever. I think it should be laning. You also need stacks. It's not really late game carry either, but I do think it can probably be quite fine. Mimikyu. Yeah, Mimikyu is still annoying to deal with. I think solid A tier, but nothing too special either. Muskerat in central area, I'm really not a big fan of. I think it should be laning, right? It has to be laning. It's okay in central area. I think you can play it without trolling. The problem is it doesn't have a level 5, and it doesn't have good late game. And a central area Pokemon kind of wants to have one of the two. Either strong level 5, right, like Dodrio, like Zoroark, like Absol, start snowballing, or have very good late game, you know, like Gardevoir, Venusaur, Dragapult, Glaceon, you know, like those Pokemon. It wants to have one of those two things, or like Tyranitar, so it's kind of lacking both. But of course, again, in solo queue, everything works. And then we have Metagross, which goes into God tiers. Big surprise. Currently, yeah, Metagross is absolutely gross and currently the best Pokemon. Hope you guys enjoyed this tier list. Again, let me know in the comments what you think about the placements, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel.